Without further ado, our speaker this morning is Jarod Brown, whom I have known for a few years. Jarod has been around at the UUCC for many more years than I have. 30 plus years. He started attending in the late 80s and joined shortly after that. He served on the board of the Open Door School for 3 years when his son was attending there. And he and I met when he was a greeter for a couple of years before the pandemic shut down. I got to know him then and enjoyed his company very much. And he's a guy that is relatable to all. And we instantly found a common bond and things to talk about. And Jarod will join us all in his tie-dyed glory this morning to talk about what motivates him, what matters in his life, his spiritual development. And I think you're going to talk a little bit about mentorship, Jarod. So I will turn it over to you and encourage everybody, when you have questions, to put them into the chat, and we will take as many of them as we can. This program is slotted for 30 minutes, and we should hopefully have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So Jarod, it's all yours.
Thank you. Set my clock here so I don't get lost. Well, it's an interesting honor to be asked to do this. It gives you a chance to take stock, to look at, how you got where you are. And it's in a busy life, it's a big ask, but I also, I'm honored to, so much work and effort goes into each Sunday production at UUCC that when somebody asks me to help, I just have to help. So thank you, Jay, and John, everyone who puts themselves into that. My story starts, I guess, with my parents, and they grew up in New York. They were Jewish. Their families were Jewish, but they found little for them in that tradition. They didn't like their families. They didn't like a lot of the dogma, and they decided to escape. So they moved to California in the 50s. Became LA City school system teachers. And they started attending the Quaker church out there. But there wasn't enough for them there. So they joined the first Unitarian church in Los Angeles. I actually owe my life to a Unitarian minister because my parents had decided not to have kids. They saw too many things in the world that gave them reason not to. But there was a minister named Stephen Fritchman, Dr. Stephen Fritchman, and Stephen convinced them that if the way to make the world better was to have kids and raise them with ethics and world vision. Lucky for me, my parents fell for that and had my brother and then me, and we adopted my little sister. Interestingly, Stephen Fritchman never had kids himself. My parents encouraged us to go to church, but didn't want to force us. But they didn't believe in junk food, and there was donuts at church. So my early experience was religion by donut. And if I went to church and attended the Sunday school, I got a donut. I was always rebellious, if you can imagine that. And at age 10, I actually rebelled against Unitarianism. A friend of mine was an evangelical, paranoid Baptist who believed, his family believed Jesus was coming at any time. And during a picnic at their house, I entered the swimming pool and got baptized. And went home and told my parents about it and watched their, one eyebrow kind of, you did what, When the preacher grabbed my head and pulled me back, I wasn't quite ready. And what looked like to others that I was receiving the Spirit was really me drowning and fearful. But I really did have good parents. They were very well versed in child psychology, and they were great parents. But they missed one important part, and that was some form of a rite of passage, some form of delineation between boy and man. And intuitively, I knew I needed that. My buddies and I were able to find some older guys who were willing to initiate us. And they took us under their wing, and they gave us these challenges to prove that we could handle pain and that we were men, The problem was they were outlaws, and the things that they had us do were dangerous and illegal and could have resulted in our deaths or hepatitis. Or it's amazing that we were able to do these things and not get in trouble, just sheer luck. I tried out other religions. I dated a Catholic, so I got to take communion, and I loved the rich traditions of the Catholic Church. I developed a fascination with machines early in my life. A friend had a father who worked at a junkyard, and we got to play at the junkyard, and I just loved cars and machines and gasoline and things that blew up. And I bought an old truck at age 15. I bought an old truck. I actually have access to a picture of it. I'll show you later if I can. And I've had it at the church several times. I still maintain it. But I started working on that truck not knowing anything about cars. And then over a 5-year period, I restored it. My mom used to make a joke about girls needing a tetanus shot to ride with me in the truck. During that 5-year period of restoring the truck, older guys helped me. They were glad that a young man was interested in an old truck, and they mentored me. And some even came to my house and showed me how accomplished builders would do it. These guys ended up being some of Southern California's best car builders, but they took me under their wing early on. Then came my inner journey. Actually started with an outer journey. I knew I needed some kind of vision quest before I knew what a vision quest was. And so I took off in that old truck. I had a big party, and I had a bulldog named Jackson, 80-pound pit bull, and he and I got in that truck, and we just took off. I didn't have a destination or a time limit. And the story of this 3-country, coast to coast, 7.5-year odyssey is really for another time. What I want to bring here are the people along the way that mentored me, and all the different crafts and trades that I learned along the way. It seemed like each town, I learned a different trade, and there was always somebody doing that trade that took me under their wing and mentored me and taught me their trade. And I stayed with each trade until I felt like I had mastered it and understood it. Those are the people I want to bring here today. I also encountered other religions there. In Seattle, I hung out with a Baha'i family for a while and enjoyed the really rich traditions and the sacredness of the reverence that they placed in their beliefs. In the Canadian Rockies, I hung out with Buddhists who we chanted. We focused on what we wanted in life and chanted, and Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and we got what we wanted somehow. It was wonderful. I hung out with my Jewish cousins in Chicago who were aghast at my lack of knowledge of our faith. I wore a yarmulke and went to temple. In Mississippi, I hung out with a Black family that took me to church, and I watched people speak in tongues and fall down on the ground and pass out. There's a hippie commune in Tennessee, one of the last remaining ones, started by Stephen Gaskin, a professor of alternative lifestyles from Berkeley. And I hung out there and at the farm. It's called the Farm. And there I was introduced to a lot of esoteric concepts and metaphysics. And that really spoke to me more than a lot of things. In Nova Scotia, I hung out with the Sufis and watched them honor their ancestors for an hour before each meeting. Some books: Autobiography of a Yogi, Black Elk Speaks, the Tao. These are things that I've used to inform what's going on in my mind. But nothing like just driving down the road in that old truck with intuitive travel really filled me the most. If you have no destination, you really can't get lost. And what I found, the times that I was closest to the divine, I was in nature. Just, the giant redwoods rivaled any church I've ever been in, except maybe the Sagrada Familia. But I found the earth-based religions to be the most tangible to me. So around the mid 80s, I arrived in Charlotte, no intention of staying. And I met this older guy who had a exotic car repair place. And he and I fell right in together. We became best friends. He offered me a partnership if I would stick around, although it was verbal only. And through his incompetence as a businessman, I actually learned how to be a businessman. And I started running his company for him. And before long, I realized that I had what I needed to start my own company. I became involved in men's work, joined a men's group. I love the collective wisdom of a men's group and the focus of sharing this. It's like a collective fatherhood where a man could get anything he didn't get from his father from a group of other men. Our group rapidly grew and we ended up dividing in half. And then those groups grew, and just through default, I ended up being a contact person for men's groups forming. And over the past several years have actually formed seven men's groups that have survived right through COVID and everything. Through that men's work, I discovered the teachings and mentorship of Robert Bly, and Michael Mead, and James Hillman. And these guys really actually solidified my belief in the importance of initiation. Most of them, especially Bly, the absence of initiation is the cause of most of the trouble we're having with young people today. And the importance of seeing our wounds that we got from our parents as actually being blessings that turn into something beautiful later. I founded the company Automotive International in '98, and I took young guys right out of high school. My wife introduced me to some from her classes that were car crazy, and I taught them how to work with their hands. And today, some of these guys are the best Ferrari and Rolls-Royce technicians in this city, still working today. The company was a place where young people felt honored, where they were taught and where they were held. And it was a great company. Somehow I always had this feeling of being lesser than somehow because I worked with my hands. Everyone in my family had master's degrees. My wife has a master's degree. This blue collar, white collar conversation, Jay and I did a service on that, the makers and fixers several years back. And we discussed Matthew Crawford's book, Shop Class as Soul Craft. It took me a long time to shed the thought that I was lesser than. These hands are often dirty, my skin is rough. I often have grease under my fingernails. Fortunately, I found if I dated a woman whose father was a mechanic, I didn't have to worry as much about that. Becoming a father, that really brought it home for me. My son Jaden was born. He was dedicated right there at the UUCC by Doug Reisner, and he attended Open Door School. And as he grew, I really put myself fully into fatherhood. I was ready to be a father, and I had welcomed him into my life, and I focused a lot on my son and mentoring him. And lucky for me, he was not like me. He was wide open to whatever I had to give him, still is today. Now he's mentoring me at 25 years old. I knew he needed to write a passage of some kind. From what I had studied and learned, I knew I couldn't initiate my own son. It had to be done by the village, by other men. And so I found, I couldn't get my men's group involved because none of them had been initiated, nor had initiated their own sons, many of whom were actually having trouble getting traction in the world. So I started searching, and that's how I discovered the Joshua Project. And the Joshua Project was started by a MSW here in Charlotte. His name is Philip Lloyd Pearson. And he started this project 20-something years ago. 12 years ago, I encountered him, and I went to one of his events, always out in the woods 4 times a year. And this is a meaningful rite of passage where young men have access to older men who have the mature masculine and help them usher them into their fullness as men, and to make sure that they feel seen by older men and appreciated by older men. It's a mentorship program. And after that one visit, I joined, And Philip was doing this whole thing by himself, the food, the registration, everything. Didn't even have insurance, anything. He was just this amazingly passionate man. And so I got some of the guys from my men's group to join me, and we formed a board. It now has a 501c3, and it fills my spirit cup. And my son got a gift out of that. In 2015, I'm sitting on a rock at some property I bought in the mountains, and I'm asking, what's next? I wanted something bigger than me. Be careful what you ask for, really. And a couple of weeks later, this wealthy man drove into my shop in a beautifully restored 68 Camaro. And we started talking, and it turned out he was looking for a business to buy. He was bored at his early retirement, and he had a lot of money. And he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. And we did a smooth, somewhat bumpy transition. My employees got kind of frightened, but I hung around for a couple of years after the sale to make sure it went smooth. Then I got to retire again into my, another passion I have, working with my hands. I do metal sculptures. And I spent 8 months building some sculptures that I've had in my mind a long time. I have several pieces around. And, but I got tapped on the shoulder by a headhunter from Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. He asked for a favor. He wanted me he knew I had trained my own mechanics. He knew about my shop. He was a car guy. And he wanted me just to visit North Meck High School and talk to the leadership team there. And that seemed to be a simple request from a friend. So I went there, and I went in the auto shop, and I met the auto shop teacher, kind of a grumpy guy. While I'm talking to him, a couple students came up to ask him questions, and he dismissed them and their questions and told them that they should already know the answers, and shamed them basically. And I was very surprised to see a teacher do that. I sat down at a conference table with a group of the administration of the school, and it suddenly occurred to me I was at a job interview. And I asked them, "Is this a job interview?" And they said, "Yeah." And you know what happens if you go to a job interview for a job you don't want, right? So we ended up, it was a half-hour conversation, and it turned into 2 hours. And what they were looking for was not teachers. They were looking for mentors. They were looking for people who could guide young people into, to finding themselves. It was beyond academic success. But my wife, Justine, is a teacher. She knows me well, and she knows that I have an allergy to bureaucracy, authority, and red tape. And so I decided, since I didn't want the job anyway, that's what I told them. And they laughed. And they wanted me to distinguish between authoritarian and authoritative. And it was actually authoritarian I have an allergy to, and they're authoritative. So they didn't feel like I would have any trouble. Sometimes our paths are unclear. This time the door had like neon on it with arrows pointing to it. And I did agree to sitting in for 6 months until they could find another shop teacher. And that was 7 years ago. Somehow we expect our youth to accept the mantle of stewardship. But the average father spends 5 minutes a day with his kids. There was a calling here for me. I believe teaching is a calling. You don't do teaching for any other reason. I've heard the conversation, the man box is the box that men are taught to fit into in our culture, most of them, where we don't accept defeat, we don't accept blame, rage and violence trump empathy and love. And so I really like this idea of being around young people that I can, especially all my classes are men. I've had maybe 4 women students in 7 years. I wasn't showing up for lunch duty, and when the admin came to find out where I was, there I was at my desk. I had 7 or 8 students around my desk, and half of my students don't have fathers, and they take their lunch with me, and we talk, and we We talk amazing conversations that have nothing to do with fixing cars. It's really about life. And they don't have older guys they can ask questions to without feeling stupid or shamed or ashamed. So here I am meeting these young people at this crossroads. This is 14, 15, 16. This is a fork in a road for a lot of these guys. Mom can't raise them anymore. They're taller than mom. They're stronger than mom. Mom did what she could. And then here I am, and I'm not trying to do a power trip with them, or I'm not even telling them you should. I'm just saying, hey, this is what I did, or I tried that and it didn't work real well for me, or something like that, My work has mostly been with young men, but all of these concepts are universal. They'll work with young women too. For reasons that might be debatable, throughout millennia, men have ushered young men into adulthood, and women have ushered young women. I don't know that that's how it has to stay. I know a lot of things are changing now, but what I'm addressing here is just the absence of initiation altogether in our culture, not who does it. So as I stand in front of my classes and I see the faces of these 14 to 7-year-olds, and I have all these stories. I'm a storyteller, so I have the stories of my journey, the stories of my childhood, the stories of my life. I can access them easily, and I share them, and they're hungry for them. They're not falling asleep. They're on the edge of their seats. I can tell I'm holding them. And I listen to the news. I listen to NPR. I get depressed sometimes, especially lately. It's so much negative stuff. And I'm always asking, is there something that I can do to make a difference? And when I'm at school, I feel like this is the one thing that I can do that might help somehow. So it's enlivening to be able to do that. I hear in my voice in front of those students wisdom from my ancestors, from my parents, from my men's groups, from my wise and wonderful wife, Justine, from all the mentors that I've met. And this wisdom is coming, it's not from me, it's coming through me. Right? And there's 21 minutes.
Awesome.
Aho.
Jarod, thank you. Speaking for myself alone, I could listen to you all day and want to hear more of your stories. So it's fascinating to hear. And let me just start off the conversation since we have just a few minutes left. You talked about initiation and rites of passage. Without divulging any confidences, can you talk a little bit more about the elements of that and how that's important, you feel, to young people, especially to young men?
Young men want to be seen by older men. They need to be. There has to be some kind of line. You're not a boy anymore. You're a man. And by the way, this is what men do. This is what boy energy is. This is what man energy is. And let's honor the boy. Don't lose the boy. Don't lose the playfulness. Don't lose what the boy has. But it's time for you to take play your role in our culture, and take a leadership role and be responsible for, and be aware that younger people are looking to you for guidance. And there's just such a huge, the gangs that we have in our culture are a result of young men looking for mentorship, right?
And they have their rites of passage for sure.
Yeah. And the fathers in our culture, they disappear. The young men used to go with their father to work. That was their initiation. Now dad disappears to some mysterious place, comes home with money. Boy stays home with mom. There's a sadness there. Robert Bly talks about a grief around that.
Other questions? Feel free to chime in. I don't see anything in the chat segment. So anyone who wants to unmute and ask a question, please go ahead.
Barry, there is one more in the chat.
Oh, there is. Oh, I see. Okay. We have two more. Greg Schroep, you indicated you have been at North Mech for 7 years. Have you kept in contact with some of your early students, and what kind of feedback have you received from them for your mentorship?
I've got students, at least 10 or 15 of them in jobs out in our community where I'll go and I'll actually talk to a boss and convince them to give a kid a chance and not to look at what color he is or how he looks, but I just pick the cream of my students and I get them jobs and I give them a set of tools, and it's really fun to watch them in their first jobs. So several of them are out there. I have an advisory board meeting twice a year, and I invite these students and they come and they tell me what they wished they had learned in my class to make sure that I'm growing in my teaching. And it's really fun to have them come back. And, you know, young men change a lot in high school. So these young guys, now they'll have beards, and some of them are growing their hair out and they're blaming me.
Barbara Davini asked, do you have any stories about how you experienced women's lib in the 70s and how boys and young men today may be encountering it? I guess maybe a reference to the Me Too movement.
Yeah, I have a lot of stories around that. One in particular would be the young men asking me what my best pickup lines were when I was their age, because they want to get laid and they want me to show them how. And it's really fun to be able to talk to them about how, my mom was a feminist, and I'm real conscious of that. I always have been around that. But I want my young men to ask these girls about themselves, don't just tell them about yourself like most men do. Learn as much as you can about that young lady. And you may find out first that you don't want to go to bed with her. But secondly, you may want to find out that you're a friend of hers first. And there's a lot that I can show these guys, that things I wish I knew when I was their age that would have helped me a lot, and not put all of my emphasis in the sexual aspects of it. So I think that what's happening in our culture today is boy, that's really necessary and much needed. I'm loving watching it, and I love being a part of it.
And Ginny Sullivan asks, do you feel that UUCC is doing enough mentorship through coming of age?
Coming of age has been on my radar for a long, long time. And the only reason I haven't involved myself in it is because I like the concept of several religions being a part of something. And I I was pulled in this other direction, but I think coming of age is fantastic. Owl, I think the people that have been running it in our church are top notch. I love what Greg's doing. I love what Kathleen's doing. A lot of these people, I'm so grateful that UUCC has that program. It's still on my radar, and I would love to be a part of it at some point. Right now, my plate's pretty full.
Jay, do we have time for one more?
Sure.
Denise asks, it seems that most young men you have dealt with have an experience or an absence of role models or parents, but have you dealt with the opposite extreme of teenagers with helicopter parents, and how did you help them break away and become their own person?
Yeah, I've had a few of those. Sometimes I actually had conflict with some of those students. And so as soon as I'm aware of the vibe from the parent, I'll have a meeting and I'll ask the parent to come in. And there we are at a table with the admin and the parent's defending the son. And I'll have a chance to ask the mother, and let her know first that I don't need the job. It's a powerful thing to tell a parent that you're working because you want to, not because you have to. And the only reason I'm there is to help your son. And what I'm seeing is a possibility of this young man still being at your dinner table at 35 years old. And what I'm trying to do is give him a trade or some kind of something. And I can't do it without your help. And if I don't have your help, I actually can't help him. So, please know that I'm trying to do something. I'll actually watch a shift happen, because you can actually see the parent visualizing their son at their dinner table at 35 years old. They could see it. He's not going anywhere. He's not doing anything. And so suddenly the parent is turned around and is verbally abusing their kid in front of the admin, came in defending the kid. So I'm watching. I can create a shift. in that way. I hope I've answered that question.
Well, Jarod, thank you. But my continuing thought throughout this whole thing is your talk is that I wish I had had more teachers like you growing up. And I think your students are extraordinarily lucky.
Well, all of us have had teachers that we can think of instantly in our minds without trying. The mentor teachers, they pop up, and what I want to do is be one of those. And I remember I was lucky; I had some that really stand out. And it's and there's a feeling I get when I drive away from school that I actually did something, that actually made some kind of difference. And one last story, there was graduation last year. A student was kind of hanging around at my class, and I'm ready to leave. And I was a little frustrated that he and his friend were still standing there, because I wanted them to leave because I had to pack up my stuff. But then I realized they wanted to talk to me, and they came up, they had tears in their eyes. And they realized that they were not going to see me again. And they swore, they said, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to cry. And I said, well, cry, and we had tears. I want them to see tears. I want them to know that it's okay. But I wasn't able as a teenager to, in real time, honor the teachers. Years later, I honored them, but they were dead or gone, or I was gone. I'm often so surprised when young people in real time can honor me. And it often just knocks me over and fills my cup.
Jarod, thank you so much. And if you ever decide to write a memoir, I think you gave us an opening line already. If you have no destination, you really can't get lost.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. I see so many people I appreciate in my little windows here. Enjoy your Sunday.
You too. Thank you.